Right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this Frostwoods Historic District educational event. I'm Thor Jepson. I'm the assistant planner here at the city of Monona, and I am also the staff representative on our Landmarks Commission. So the purpose of this meeting is really an educational session about the possible nomination of the Frostwoods neighborhood as a National Historic District. For context, in 2019, the city hired a consultant to perform an intensive architectural and historical survey to identify potentially eligible properties for the National Register of Historic Places. And that survey identified that 123 out of the 143 residential properties in the Frostwoods neighborhood as contributing, meaning they have historical or architectural significance. And they found that the district was likely eligible to apply to become a historic district given that history and the architecture within the neighborhood. The neighborhood is especially known for its density of international style homes. So the Frostwoods Home Association Board of Directors is exploring the possibility and feasibility of potentially applying to become a historic district. So that would be an effort led by the Frostwoods Homes Association and not by the city. It'd be a voluntary process by them if a majority of property owners vote to do so. This meeting is really to educate property owners prior to any potential vote or any potential nomination. And the city is really here just to support that process if it does come to that. So tonight we've invited some staff from the Wisconsin Historical Society to present on what it means to live in a property listed on the National Register of Historic Places, what the listing process entails and the application process, the tax benefits available to property owners for places listed on the National Register of Historic Places, potential grants that might be available for facilitating that listing process. So we have with us tonight Jason Tisch. He's the Preservation Education Coordinator and Certified Local Government Coordinator at the Historical Society, and then Elizabeth Hilton, who is the National Register Coordinator. So they're going to give a presentation here after I turn it over to them, and then afterwards we'll have a little Q&A session. And again, I have some additional resources that I can share after the meeting if anybody's interested. And also, like I mentioned before, the meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube on the city's YouTube channel. And so you'll be able to reference it whenever you need. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Thanks, Thor. And thank you all for inviting us. I love to get out into communities and talk with people about this stuff. So I was kind of looking forward to meeting y'all in person, but I think switching to Zoom is probably the right call tonight. So it's good to see you all. Thanks for being here. I see a couple of familiar names. Hello. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to talk about well, let me share my screen first so you can get a little more information than just me talking here. Let's see, share screen. Okay, how's that? Can you all see my slides? Okay,
Looks good.
Excellent. I'm gonna go back. All right, so I'm gonna talk more generally, and then Elizabeth, who is the National Register expert, is gonna get into the kind of the meat of what you're all here to learn tonight. So we're gonna talk about just a little bit about that intensive survey that Thor introduced. I'll talk about the tax credit program. We'll do kind of a mini tax credit session. We can talk for a long time about tax credits, but I'm just going to do an abbreviated tax credit session just so you can kind of get an idea of that benefit. That's the big benefit to residential districts listed in the National Register. And then Elizabeth will talk about the National Register program and how that works. So, as Thor mentioned, Monona got a certified local government grant in 2019 to do a survey of the entire city. That's how we kind of got to this conversation. That survey identified 16 individual buildings in Monona that are potentially eligible for the National Register and one historic district. Frost Woods is the only district cluster of properties that this survey found eligible for the National Register. And just for fun, I threw a few of those potentially eligible properties up here just so you can kind of get a sense of what the survey looked at. Just from left to right, starting at the upper left is the Owen House, built in 2 phases in 1911, 1932. And top center is the Charles Fix House of 1926. It found some commercial properties eligible as well. The Ralph's Shell service station on the top right, kind of an unusual find, but it meets the basic criteria. It's old enough and it has its historic integrity. It looks like it was designed, looks like it did when it was first built. You're probably aware that the bottom left, the Kohl's food store, was recently listed in the National Register. In the center, the Immaculate Heart of Mary Catholic Church. And the bottom right, the Charles Wright and Edna Shepherd Thomas House, built in 1931. And that one, 2 of these are in Frost Woods, actually the top left and the bottom right. So just kind of a taste of what kind of properties the survey found eligible. Which brings us to the Frost Woods District. So that 2019 survey recommended that the entire Frost Woods neighborhood meets those basic eligibility criteria for the National Register. Here you can see a map of the Frost Woods District. The red border is the entire proposed historic district. The other borders are, the blue border is the initial Frost Woods subdivision, platted in the 1920s. And that's where several of those early houses pre-World War II were designed by the architecture firm of Beatty and Strang, Hamilton, Beatty, and Alan Strang. And Hamilton Beatty actually lived in this neighborhood. One of the houses in this neighborhood was the architect's house. During their partnership, they kind of adapted that international style that you see in the top photo there, the top house photo. They kind of adopted in their early partnership in the 1930s, this international style, which was popular during those years, and built a cluster of them in this neighborhood. It's one of the densest clusters, if not the densest cluster of international style houses in the whole region. And then the other 2 additions, the Owen Meadow edition in purple and the Pleasant Hill edition in green, were post-war subdivisions adjacent to that original Frost Woods subdivision. And so those 3 sections, those 3 plats, are what make up the eligible Frost Woods Historic District. And those 2 later subdivisions, you all know, are largely filled with houses that were popular during the post-war decades, mostly ranches. There are a few split levels in there and some contemporary style houses. So this whole area, the whole district, the red outline district, was found to be eligible under 3 of the 4 criteria. You only need to meet 1 of the criteria to be eligible for the National Register, but the district was found to meet 3 of those criteria. Criterion A for the history of community planning and development. And one of the keys there is that the Homeowners Association is one of the longest running homeowners associations, started in the 1940s. It's also eligible for criterion B for some of the prominent people who lived in the neighborhood, including some UW-Madison faculty and staff, and some folks who were active in local politics. And it was also eligible for under criterion C for the architecture in the neighborhood. It presents a collection of architectural styles that were popular between the 1930s and then up to the 1970s, including that concentration of Beatty and Strang International style houses. So a quick mini session on tax credits. This is the biggest benefit of being listed in the National Register. There are two tax credit programs, a state program and a federal program. The federal program is only available to commercial properties, and so the Frostwoods, as it's a residential historic district full of residential properties, you folks would be eligible for the state program, and that returns 25% of qualified expenses to the homeowner as a direct credit to your state income tax obligation. So what are qualified expenses? The list down at the bottom of this slide includes most, if not all, of the qualified expenses: masonry, roofing, windows, painting, siding repair, all of the exterior materials and internal systems, inside systems, so HVAC, electrical systems, plumbing systems, structural repairs, anything that is important to the building being able to function and stand is eligible for tax credits. Things that are not eligible are things like electrical fixtures, plumbing fixtures, replacement additions are not eligible. Replacing materials with materials that are that don't match the historic integrity of the house. So quickly looking at the parameters of the historic tax credit program. So like I said, 25% of qualified expenses returned to the owner as a credit to the state income tax obligation. Property must be listed or individually eligible for the National Register or contributing to a listed historic district. So specific to Frostwoods, if Frostwoods was designated and listed in the National Register, all contributing properties in the district would be eligible for the tax credit program. And I think it's most of the properties. I didn't get the numbers, but it's something like 85 to 90% of the properties in the district would be contributing if it was listed. The work must meet federal standards for retaining the historic characteristics of the property. And so that's why things like additions are not eligible, replacing historic windows with, say, new vinyl windows that that negatively impact the historic character of the property. So when you use the tax credit program, the work that you do must meet standards if you're going to use the program. Otherwise, their listing in the National Register places no requirements on alterations to the property. The minimum expenditure for the program is $10,000, so you have to spend at least $10,000, and the maximum is $40,000. But there's no limit on the number of projects that you can have open at any one time. So if you have $100,000 worth of eligible work, you can open 3 different tax credit projects to fit that $100,000 into the maximum. You have 2 years to do the work, typically. You can request a 5-year phased timeline if you want to phase your work over 5 years. That's useful if there's if you're combining a number of projects to get to that minimum 10,000. Or if you have a lot of work to do and it'll take a long time to do it, you can phase that over 5 years. There is also a 5-year recapture clause in the program, so that all work that you do within 5 years has to meet those standards. And so, for example, if you use the tax credit program to put a new roof on your house, and then 2 years later you put a big addition on the front that completely compromises the historic integrity of the house, then there's the recapture clause can kick in, and the state can recapture some of a prorated portion of the tax credit that you got. Let's see. So I did run through the eligible work, the work that's eligible for the tax credit program: exterior items, structural elements, interior systems. So the process for using the tax credit program, this is vastly oversimplified because there's a lot of steps within these steps, but basically, part one, you make sure your property is eligible. And that's just, it's really just a simple form that you send in saying that your property is listed in the National Register individually, or it's a contributing property in a historic district. And we can verify that with you. It's a pretty easy step. Part two is to plan your project and get it approved. And that takes some negotiation with our tax credit reviewers. They're going to look at your proposal and make sure that it meets the federal standards for the program that the program is based on. You can ask questions like, can you do it in 2 years, the typical time frame for tax credit project, or do you need to phase it over 5 years? And that's just a simple checkbox that you can check to request that 5-year phasing. Do you need to open more than one project? Do you have work that costs over $40,000? Or do you need to group smaller projects? You can also group smaller projects to get to that $10,000 minimum. Then you have your plan reviewed and approved by tax credit reviewers in our office before you start the work. It can't be applied retroactively. So work that you've already done cannot be applied to your tax credit. So when the plan is approved and you've gotten approval from our tax credit reviewer that the work meets the standards, you go ahead and do the work. Part three, when you're finished with the work, you come back to the tax credit reviewer, send in photos of the work that you did. The tax credit reviewer makes sure that you did it as you said you would do and adhered to all the conditions, any conditions that were put on the work. And once that is reviewed and confirmed, you'll get documentation that you can use that you can send in when you do your income taxes. So like I said, that's a simplified version. Obviously, it takes some time and sometimes negotiation. Sometimes it's a really simple project. If it's just a re-roofing project, that's a really simple project to approve. But more major alterations or interventions, more major projects can take some time to negotiate and get approved. One last thing that I want to touch on is that Monona is a certified local government. Thor mentioned that at the beginning of in his introduction. That just means that as a CLG, Monona has access to grant funding for historic preservation planning projects. Here are the typical projects that CLGs do. The highlighted one is the one that's relevant for you all tonight. Monona can get grant funding to do a nomination for the historic district, for the Frostwoods Historic District. That grant funding is available through my office. I'm the CLG coordinator, so the city, it's a grant that the city applies for. And Monona has gotten grants in the past to do the survey in 2019 and again last year to do some National Register nominations. So there is grant funding available. if the neighborhood is interested in moving ahead with the National Register nomination, um, there's grant funding to do that. I think that is all for me. So now we can get into the fun part of the National Register. And Elizabeth, go ahead and jump into it. Oh, do you want to share your slides, Elizabeth?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Stop. Okay, it's all yours.
All right. All right. So I am the National Register Coordinator, as Thor and Jason mentioned. My job is help to facilitate the National Register process through the listing process by working with property owners and local governments and consultants to help you get your properties listed. So what is the National Register of Historic Places? What does that mean? It is an official list of significant places. It was established in 1966 through the National Historic Preservation Act, and it is maintained by the National Park Service. Jason already went through a couple examples in Monona, but I would be remiss not to include some of my favorites. The Kohl's grocery store is such an amazing building, and it's hard not to like a building called the Bungalow. Those are both listed National Register properties. And up top over here, we have the Schrader House, which has currently been submitted to the Park Service for listing. So how do you list a property or a district? Initial consultation is necessary. With SHPO, we follow the survey that was provided. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so what does listing provide? It's an honorary recognition. And it also provides limited protection when a property is endangered by a federally funded or licensed activity. So it can provide limited protection to your property. And like Jason mentioned earlier, the option to seek tax credits, which is really the main benefit of listing your property other than bragging rights. So how are properties listed? Well, step one was the survey that was conducted earlier, where it identified that a historic district is present. Then there's a lot of documentation and research that goes along with that to support the original survey that was conducted. They are prepared on National Register forms, which are organized by the Park Service. And then it goes to the review board. We have a state historic preservation review board that meets quarterly. We actually have a meeting this Friday. And they are qualified professionals in their respective fields. And they determine whether a property warrants listing on the National Register or not. And then it goes to the Park Service for final approval. This process can take well over a year from start to finish. Many local governments seek listing to support their community in creating historic districts, which allows for the tax credit benefit. This can appear to be a daunting process. The book to fill out these National Register forms is, quite intense. So we recommend hiring a qualified professional, a consultant, to help guide you through this process and prepare the nomination. So how are properties evaluated? Well, the Park Service has established a set of criteria that Jason mentioned earlier. Criterion A is association with a single event, like the founding of a town, the patterns of events through education or trends of trade and commerce. B is association with significant individuals from our past. Such as city council members, politicians, artists, And criterion C is significance for their physical design. So that's their architectural style. And it also includes well-known architects. And then D is archaeology. Now, in order for a property to be listed, they must retain integrity. Integrity means that it still has its original design, materials, and setting. And like Jason said, there aren't a lot of historic districts that fall within 3 of these criteria. That's pretty profound. So properties can be listed either individually, such as a house or grocery store that we saw earlier, or as a district. And a district is a well-defined, visually and architecturally distinctive area that exhibits cohesion in contrast to the other area. So when you think about your neighborhood, you have this planned landscape there. And that's why you have those boundaries and it was developed within that plat with those 2 additions. Within a historic district, there are contributors. So there are the older buildings that retain integrity and the non-contributors, which could be old building as well that are original to the district, or they're newer, but maybe they've been altered or they've lost many of those features that would make them historic. So what does it mean to really be listed? Are there limitations? All the following examples will show you that you truly do own this property and you can do what you want. So let's step through these. If my property is listed, I must open it to the public. House museums, hotels, government properties are public places, so they are in turn open to the public. You can have house tours or not, that's entirely your choice. If my property is listed, I may not paint my house a color scheme that I like. You could paint it a rainbow, or my 6-year-old wants to paint mine pink. The state and the feds do not care, nor does your local historic preservation commission. There are no laws against what color you can paint your house. If my property is listed, I cannot change anything. You can remodel your kitchen or your bathroom, create an addition, install air conditioning, or update any of your mechanical systems. As long as there's no federal or state funds or permits involved, you're not restricted in the work that you can do. One thing I will make a note of is if you do extensive work that is not original to the exterior of the house, it may be determined a non-contributor, and then you would not qualify for tax credits. Any building 50 years or older is eligible for listing in the state and national register. Um, you have to have your property has to have significance. Just because it's 50 years of age or older, um, does not mean it's automatically historic or it's eligible for listing in the National Register. It has to meet one of the 4 criteria that was discussed earlier. Um, properties listed in the National Register require review by a local government or historic preservation landmarks commission. This comes down to local laws. So the state and the feds are not involved, nor is your historic preservation commission. Monona does have a local ordinance and the commission is authorized to review exterior alterations. So any proposed alterations will receive a certificate of appropriateness from the commission. And if you have specifics regarding those, I recommend you reach out to Thor. He's very knowledgeable and can assist you with that. So that last slide brought up a hot topic what is the difference between state and national register? So if a property is listed on the state register through the review board, it's then pushing it up to the national register status. We've had very few buildings that are in districts that are listed on the state register and not the national register, because that's the end goal for us. But there is a difference there with local designation. The state and federal regulatory actions, such as road widening, have to look at state and national register listed properties. And a property must be listed on the state and national register in order to receive the tax credits. Pulling a permit for work on a locally designated property that goes through your historic preservation for review, like I previously mentioned. So if you're asking yourself why list your property other than tax credits, because I think that's the main thing we're really driving home tonight. Um, it is bragging rights. It's an honor. It brings pride in your community, and it shows your community history. Beautiful buildings help bolster tourism and economic revenue that goes back into your community's pockets. So with that, here is our contact information for Jason and me, and also Paul Porter, who is our tax credit reviewer. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email. We're often in the office and happy to help. It's our job to help you take care of your buildings and appreciate them. So don't hesitate to contact us. And with that, if anybody has any questions, Jason and I are happy to answer anything that you might have.
Absolutely. As long as we're here and you've got us, let's get into it. What questions do you have? What hesitations do you have?
I know that was a lot of information.
Is there any benefit for a specific property to be listed vice being that same property being part of a district?
There's no additional benefit. It's just bragging rights. It shows that, it shows that your property individually stands alone to have its own significance. So you will find some buildings like Bungalow Inn. They have a really wonderful property and great history. And so their building is listed and they are eligible for the tax credits.
Yeah, and whether you're listed individually or a contributing property in a historic district, you're eligible for the tax credit program. Right now, there are two properties in Frostwoods, or I think one is designated and one has been nominated but is not quite designated yet. So those two individual properties in Frostwoods are eligible for the tax credit program. But that's it. If the entire neighborhood was designated, then all the contributing properties in the neighborhood would be eligible. Does that get at your question, Thor? Elizabeth, will you stop sharing so I can see?
Oh gosh, sure.
Faces.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I have one last slide that I just wanted to share. This is our website. If you go to our website, there is a slew of information that includes information on the tax credits, National Register listing, processes, as well as genealogy and whatnot. So I just want to make sure you're aware. If you have any follow-up questions or want to dig a little deeper into some more information, then you can go to wisconsinhistory.org.
I have a question about the process of approval.
Sure.
And maybe you addressed it and I just didn't quite catch it. So I have for anybody else, for all of my neighbors listening, I have a somewhat unique position here as I have a seat on the Landmarks Commission, and I'm also on the Frostwoods Neighborhood Association Board. So, which means I live in Frostwoods, and my house, I believe, is one of the contributing houses, as it's one of the original ranches. So, but my question is, so as this approval process, Does every house in the district do we have to have some kind of agreement from everybody? So what's the sort of process to get everybody on board if we want to do this historic district?
Sure. Well, that's one of the reasons why we're having these meetings, is to be able to provide correct information on what listing entails, what it really means, and then see if there is a majority support. So there must be majority support to list a historic district. When we go through the application process, we have a public notice that goes out throughout the Monona community, and the mayor, the Historic Preservation Commission is all notified, as well as each individual property owner. So they have an opportunity to submit a form that says that they oppose listing. But if the majority do not oppose, then the district moves forward. We also accept letters of support, which I'm sure Thor would provide, and maybe Teresa as well, to show support for the listing. And those letters of support or opposition, if that did happen, which I haven't experienced quite yet, they would go to the Park Service when it would be formally listed on the National Register.
Okay, so it's really an opt-out. Once a proposal goes through, it's an opt-out for houses, and that's all houses, not just the contributing?
All houses get the option to oppose it, but if the majority wants to be listed, then everybody is listed. Everybody is included in the historic district. They would just have that contributor or non-contributor status attached to the address.
Great, thank you.
So, excuse me, is that then a vote that comes up through the Frostwoods Association?
I think it's something that internally the HOA would need to discuss to see if there is that majority support to move forward with district listing, because you don't want to go through this process of all the time and research it takes to fill out this National Register form and then see, oh, people don't really want this. So that's one of the reasons why Thor has engaged everybody here to get us here today to discuss this, to see if the support exists.
Okay.
I just want to kind of address that. I am also on the Frostwoods board with Brenda, and also on the Landmarks Commission. And we did set this up ahead of our annual meeting, which is in April, so that we could get as much information to our members as possible, because we do plan to put this on the annual meeting agenda.
Oh, that's great.
Excellent. Thank you.
I will add that if there's interest in the city for getting a grant to do this nomination, this is kind of part of that process. We want to know before we grant funding to do the nomination. We want to know that there's a majority support for the nomination. If there's not, if we're hearing that there's not a majority support, we're not going to give grant funding to the city to do the nomination, because then it would not go through. And there is an official process, and Elizabeth can correct me if I get it wrong here. During the National Register nomination process, our office will send out these letters notifying to every homeowner in the district, notifying them that the district has been nominated, and every homeowner has that opportunity then to kind of cast an official vote. Right, Elizabeth? Is that a good characterization of it?
I wouldn't use the word vote, because it's not 20 say yay and 5 say nay. It's more of just the opposition letters that we take in, that they can submit to our office, that we have a paper copy that shows that they oppose. And then when we will tally all those up and determine whether or not the district can move forward. And part of my job in facilitating the process is working with you. So we have full communication with y'all to make sure you're aware where we are in the process, or with the consultant that would be hired to prepare the nomination, so that you know what's going on.
So it sounds like there's only benefits and no restrictions. Why are people typically opposed to this type of thing?
So I think that's why, we show the slides of misconceptions of all the myths, like, "Ooh, the government's going to tell you what to do." And it's like, no, we're the good guys. We're trying to give you free money.
The reason the reason that's such a pernicious myth is that it's hard to, and we think about this all day. So this is second nature to us at the SHPO office. But most people don't think about and don't understand that there are two separate programs. There's a National Register program, which provides no regulation at all, unless you're using federal money or permitting, which is rare. And then there's local designation under a local ordinance. Monona has a local ordinance, and Monona can designate buildings under that local ordinance. And then there's local regulations. That's when you have to go see the Historic Preservation Commission and get a certificate of appropriateness when you want to make an exterior alteration. So, and a lot of people conflate that. They think it's a historic property, and so there's all these regulations. But you really need to remember that it's two separate programs: the National Register in one bucket, and local designation in another. They're completely separate programs, different designation processes, different criteria for designation, they're just different programs. And I think a lot of people conflate that and don't separate the two. So that's where you get a lot of misunderstanding. And yes, you're right. It's all carrot, no stick for the National Register.
Jason, can I just add to that a little bit? Because I work in historic preservation and work with you guys.
Yeah.
I think some of the misconceptions can also be the process if you do use historic tax credits, then there are requirements that you have to follow. So
Just so you don't lose them.
right. You have to follow the National Park Service's guidelines in order to get those tax credits.
Yeah, it's called the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, but that's really long, so we just call it the standards. And part of I guess that's the one catch that you might have with tax credits, is that for 5 years after, and Jason discussed this, 5 years after you receive a tax credit, any work that you're doing to your property, you need to submit that to our office, and then it goes to the Park Service for final approval before you do the work, because it's basically helping you maintain your house to keep that historic aesthetic, to keep that appeal, for the reason why it's eligible for listing today. So essentially it's really helping your HOA maintain your neighborhood and maintain your buildings.
Yeah, Rebecca, thanks for making that point and that distinction. You're right. If you use the tax credit program, then you've got to meet the standards, those design standards. It's an incentive-based program. The National Register is an incentive-based program. The incentive is the tax credit program, the tax credits. It incentivizes owners to do work that retains the historic character of your property.
So building off of that a little bit.
Oh, I was going to go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
Go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, just to be clear, you don't have to get tax credits and you don't have to do anything.
Right.
Yeah, it's your prerogative. It's your property.
If you want the incentive, take it.
Yeah. So to dig into that just a little bit, which most people look at the tax credit side of it. I heard at the beginning, you mentioned the planner, you got to get a planner to come in. See, our house was built part of it was built in the 40s. I think 38 or 39, I was told. It's a little ranch, but it's been added on to over the years. We've been here for, I think, 8 or 9 years. So does that person, I don't mean to dig into this too far, but does the planner then come in, evaluate the older part of the home that we would want to have redone, where we would get the work redone, or do they dig right into that in that aspect? I don't know if I'm making myself clear or not.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I think it's your property as a whole is eligible, right? It's not just the
Okay.
original portion, it's the
Okay.
entire building. And oftentimes it can include your garage as well, and then you can use tax credits on your garage if it's a contributing element.
Okay.
Which
Because
is
our house was probably doubled in size. I believe the addition was added in the 90s. I heard late 80s, early 90s, something like that. And we could use, obviously you want work done in various areas, but I was just kind of curious to dig into that a little bit.
Well, there would be the question of whether your house is a contributing property in the district.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So that question would be answered in the nomination, at the nomination
Yep.
point.
Got it.
and
If your house is contributing, then you're eligible for tax credits.
Got it.
And even though the survey was conducted and they determined the historic district is there, a consultant still needs to come by and look at every single house in the
Right.
district, and
They
they will evaluate it to determine whether it's contributing or non-contributing as it stands today.
Elizabeth, when they did the survey, they did do that, and
They'll have to do it again.
Right, they'd have to do
Yeah.
it again if we
Right,
went through with the nomination, correct?
right.
And isn't it also, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it also true that you can have part of your property be contributing and part not be contributing?
So you could have a contributing house and a non-contributing garage.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Park Service just put out guidance recently where they want to make sure we account for every secondary structure that's located on property. So I don't know if y'all have any chicken coops out there, but those could also be contributing. I don't think you can get tax credits because nobody's chickens can't qualify for tax credits.
Mhm.
Yeah, but people have been having chicken coops for hundreds of years, right?
This is true. This is true.
I've
So,
been looking to get this old cistern redone in our basement, but
Oh, yeah.
So Elizabeth, I have a question. Like, let's say that, the consultant goes through the district and let's just say I don't live in the district, but let's just say my house is not qualifying. I've lived there, but just for argument's sake, let's just imagine I live there. It's I'd love to live there. It's a beautiful area of the city. But anyway, let's say I do and my house does not qualify and I really want to be a part of it. Does the consultant say, well, these are the reasons why it does not qualify, and these are are there opportunities for me to make changes to my house so that it would qualify?
Yes, you can always ask to amend a National Register nomination. That would be a simple form that we could produce, but you would have to make sure that you're meeting the Secretary of the Interior standards such that it would qualify for contributing status. And it's probably something that our tax credit reviewer could help facilitate in terms of making sure it would qualify as a contributor, but you cannot receive tax credit
That was my question.
dollars
Right.
until it is officially
Right.
listed as a contributor to the district.
I was pretty sure that I knew the answer to all the questions I was asking, and I was leading up to, however,
It's a good
I
question.
can only use the tax credits once it contributes. Yeah. Okay, makes
Right,
perfect
right.
sense. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Logical.
And
Thank
it
you.
is a motivator, right? For districts, you want to keep that overall aesthetic and design quality that all of the buildings contribute to make up this cohesive, wonderful neighborhood. So it does, you hope it does help with those non-contributors want to turn them around.
And then let's say on the opposite side, let's say I'm a person who I'm just dead set against this whole idea. for whatever reason I have. When I submit my opt-out preference, does your organization, I mean, is there any interest in someone reaching back, circling back with me and just having a conversation to make sure that I fully understand that I have my facts straight? Or is the opt-out person just like, okay, we trust that they know why they're opting out, we're not going to bother them?
Well, it's why we hold these meetings and try to get as many people as possible so we can educate them to the best of our abilities. But everybody is entitled to their own opinion. So if they oppose listing, they oppose it. We don't want to, poke the bear or try to say the government is good. Come on, guys. It's that would be a steep hill to climb. But everybody's entitled to what they want to do with their property. But if the majority wants a historic district, they're going to be located within a historic district, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
Based on the current survey, is there a way to tell if our house is contributing or non-contributing? And then also once a future survey is done for the nomination, is there an easy way to know whether it's contributing or not contributing?
What is your
I believe
what
it's
is
in
your address, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, 6003 Winnequa. I'm just wondering more in general.
The survey does have a map in it where it identifies contributing and non-contributing properties at the time of the survey. Of course, whatever changes have been made since 2019 would be taken into account for the nomination. But if you have access to the survey, there is a map in there that identifies all the contributors.
Is the survey easily accessible?
If the city doesn't have a copy that they can send, I can send you a PDF.
Yeah, I have a copy, and I can share it on the event website, on the city website, the event slide for this, and I can also share it with the homeowners association and to distribute around.
So there's actually a link on the website. Could you just share that in the chat?
I pulled up the website or the survey right now. I'm not sure based on the number of the address where specifically it lies. Can y'all see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does red mean not contributing?
The purple means not contributing and the blues are contributing. Is it farther north or?
It looks like we're not contributing then.
Okay.
Huh.
Hard to see those as a being a map guy myself. That's a tricky map.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
We have there's a table as well. It's a little easier with addresses listed out. It might be easier that way to determine. And Rebecca, we have chat disabled for our city Zoom meeting, so I can't share it directly within the Zoom meeting here, but I'll make sure to email that around. Let's see, Kurt, was that you who was asking?
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to just get in touch with me directly as well, I can share that report with you.
Otherwise, you can just go to the city website, Kurt. It's on the landmarks landing.
Mm-hmm.
I could see there that we're not contributing. I'm just a little surprised since we're one of the international style houses, and I know there's been modifications made to it.
Right,
so
and
I'm sure the modifications already kicked us off, but wow.
Kurt, I think that is part of it. You would see that the old Miller house, I think, is also not contributing because of the amount of modifications that have been done to it. But that doesn't mean, I know you've done some work on your house recently, so that doesn't mean whatever you've done now could have helped. And it doesn't mean, whoever surveys it, if we do the national nomination, the people that survey it might consider it contributing.
Yeah. No, it's just funny. One of the pictures you showed was our house of the character in the neighborhood. And we're not contributing.
Interesting. They'll take when a consultant does the nomination, they'll make basically a fresh call on whether each property is contributing or not. So the photos that I used were were properties that I would consider contributing, but maybe it was one of the ones Elizabeth used.
Was this the Pooley house?
Yes.
Yeah. I see in our state database that the windows were metal replacements, which that's just windows.
Right.
What you can do is when the consultant comes through and they're researching the property, you can provide them with the information that you have, and they will reevaluate it as it stands when the nomination is being prepared. So they're going to assess the integrity now.
Okay, understand. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you very much for this. I have to opt back into my family life. So Thor, if you could send that out to me as well, that'd be fantastic. I appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah. It might be easier if you just get in touch with me. You can find my
Sure.
contact information on the city website, and then I can
Perfect.
circulate that around.
All right. Thank you all. I really appreciate this. I'll look forward to the homeowners association meeting in April as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
So for anyone who isn't aware, there are either 121 or 122 homes in the Frostwoods Homes Association. There are actually 121, but I don't know how the survey is counting it. There's one house that's completely surrounded by Frostwoods that is not in Frostwoods due to a disagreement between the original builder of that home and the original founder of the neighborhood. So there is one house that might be included in your mapping that we don't, that is definitely not part of our neighborhood association. So I just don't know how you'd be counting it, but either way, it's 121 or 122
That's in the
homes that we're
neighborhood
dealing with.
association. In the neighborhood
What's that?
association. That's in the neighborhood association boundary.
Correct.
It's within the geography of the neighborhood association, but it is not deeded into the association, and all of these houses are deeded into the association, the others.
And I think so it sounds like the proposed historic district is a bit larger than the neighborhood association then, because I think there are something like 140 properties in the proposed district.
Yeah, thank you. 143.
Well, in that case, Thor will, the Landmarks Commission will need to identify the homes not included and make sure that they get notified. We only notified the stepping aside from the Landmarks Commission hat as neighborhood association hat, I only notified people in our neighborhood association.
Something to do for the next meeting.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting. So there's Rebecca, I see your face too. I'm thinking, what's the boundary? What's the boundary change? That I wonder if it's by block. You know, if the Frostwoods Association is mid-block, it ends, and maybe they included the whole block.
I didn't realize that it included other homes.
I didn't either. Do you have them? Somebody have the map of the proposed district?
Yeah. See if I can get the overview. Mine's broken up into quadrants, so unfortunately it's not. I don't know if
You can scroll through those and see, we can see, still tell you.
Here's the map from the report.
Yeah, you go all the way down to Graham and we do not.
We do not go down to Graham.
So we stop at Greenwood, don't we? And it may be a couple further.
A couple past Greenwood, I think. It's mid-block that it ends, so that's some of it. One side of bridge.
Kind of like if Greenwood were to go all the way through, it's one house on each side, isn't it? Maybe.
So that's really interesting to me. So the HOA stops, but the consultant who prepared the survey identified a larger district, even though it's eligible for its plan.
Yeah, they may not have realized the boundaries.
The city streets didn't follow, it was just the streets were added.
Yeah, they were added, but you think that the plats would be identified when researching the property. So that this is
So do you
something.
think?
Oh, I was just going to say it's just another thing that the consultant can look into to identify where the proper boundaries should be for the
Right.
historic district, right?
Because maybe those other houses shouldn't be included in the historic district. I think that would be something the consultant would have to
I mean,
look
one of
at.
the, right, exactly. One of the reasons why this area is eligible is for the significant person, right, who planned the community. And
Mhm.
so if it goes outside what he actually planned, and the planning would fall under criterion A, it's,
Right.
I would think it
Okay.
would have to stick with the original plan and the additions that were part of that. The consultant would need to dive into that to
Right.
make sure the boundaries are appropriate. Absolutely.
If those extra properties in this area are contributing, in the list that we have, would they be appropriate to include in the boundary then?
If they were a part of the original plan by the developer, then I would say it should be, but if it's not, then there would have to be a strong case for why they were adding in a section in the neighborhood that is not a part of it. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna put on
It's,
my neighborhood hat here. I would not think it appropriate because they are not part of the Frostwoods Homes Association that we've all been a part of. That it is the Frostwoods district for that reason, and they aren't part of the they aren't part of that. I don't think they're contributing to the development.
I think Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong here, but
Mhm.
it would depend on the criteria under which the property or which the district is designated.
Mhm.
If it's designated for criterion C, which is architecture, the consultant is going to look at every house to determine whether it contributes to that body of architectural styles that run from about 1930 to 1970. And if once on the edges of the district, once that concentration kind of fades out, that's where they'll draw the boundary, regardless of the subdivision boundaries or the neighborhood association boundaries. But if it's designated under say criterion A for planning and development,
Mhm.
then it would probably more closely look at the actual subdivision boundaries. So it's
Right.
gonna depend on the criterion under which it's designated.
Well, I'd be surprised that more houses weren't included if it were strictly based on style of houses. There's not a lot of difference between the houses built on one side of bridge and the other than that. Some are in Frostwoods and some aren't, for instance. But
This
I'm
would
not
also,
the consultant, so.
no, it's also a good question that I think Jason and I will take to our state historic preservation officer, because all districts that are surveyed, she has to sign off on the district boundaries, and she might have more information than more knowledge than what we have right here as I'm staring at the instance of survey trying to read through it.
Right.
But yeah, definitely something that we would follow up on.
Yeah, do you even know of an instance where you would include, where you have included more properties than what were actually in the subdivision?
Well, if it's an architectural survey, then you would do that, right?
Right,
But
that
this
would be
is,
called something different, wouldn't it? I mean, would you name it after a neighborhood?
if the majority of the district is the neighborhood, then yeah, they might do that.
So
So
these properties to the plan south here,
mhm.
I think they're in a different neighborhood subdivision, like they are called something.
So at that point, maybe they would hyphenate the name. But then again, what is going on with these buildings down there, and why weren't they extended further? I would have to put on my architectural historian hat and drive over there, give it a good looking at.
Okay, so it sounds like we've raised some questions. I have what I think
Yes.
is a complete map I could share, but of the Frostwoods neighborhood. I don't know if I can share my screen or not.
You should be able to, yeah.
This is what, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
My map. This is what I have as the Frostwoods neighborhood map, and you can see that there's 2 houses past Greenwood that are included. And I think there's some other differences as well. And this map also includes originally where the church is on the other side of Pheasant Hill Road was included in Frostwoods. And then that in the 70s was deeded out so they could build a church. So that property itself was in, but then it was released from the neighborhood so that they could build a church there. So that's why it's included.
Oh, okay.
Actually, that church could be included.
Well, it was originally that property was part of the plan. But because our neighborhood requires homes only, it had to be released from the neighborhood in order for the church to be built.
Yeah, and looking at the survey map, they went 3 parcels south of that on of where the HOA boundaries are, and then they also follow along the west side of Ridge Road. Or is that the north side? I need a north arrow in there. Yeah,
no, the map is
the west
flipped here.
side of Bridge Road.
So
It looks
some
like
additional
this one.
research.
It looks like all of Henua Circle is included in the neighborhood boundary,
Yes.
but in the map and the report, it's only 110 Henua Circle, I think, is included in the historic district boundary.
That could be because his house was originally a Winnequa address.
Yes.
That property was split.
And 110 Henua, that is the home that is been nominated already, but not yet approved.
Right.
The lot in front of that is a new house that would not be contributing, but has been built. So
it's also interesting that the north side on Panther Trail, I guess the streets were revised based on what I'm looking at.
What do you mean? I live on
The streets changed. How you have those 3 top parcels, those are not included in the survey boundaries of the historic district.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So some additional work to be done. And then
it's just skimming through the survey. I haven't been able to identify anything as to why they drew the boundaries where they did.
I don't think they had this map for one. So when they did that survey.
Yeah, that's something that the consultant will look at when they basically research the history of the neighborhood. They'll look at where those subdivision boundaries were and where the neighborhood association boundaries were. And then, I mean, they're going to have a choice of whether they nominate it for architecture, and then they'll look at all of those properties that contribute to that era of architecture, or do they nominate it under another criteria, planning and development, where the boundaries might be different.
Okay.
It's
I'll
one or
stop
the other.
sharing. I'll stop sharing other than to say the house that is not in the neighborhood association is 6015 Winnequa. So you can see it's completely obviously embedded in the neighborhood, but it is not deeded into our neighborhood association. For what that's worth.
I don't think it would be contributing anyway anymore.
No, it's a brand new home, so.
No. Well, and that's something that a lot of consultants take into account too. If they're going to keep with the planning and development, then they would keep with those original boundaries that you showed before. Now I want to chat with Mead and Hut, Jason.
Thor, I thought I heard you start a question about whether it has to be either one criteria or the other. Is that what you asked?
Can it be nominated under multiple criteria?
Yep.
Can be. It only needs to meet one to be listed, but it can certainly be nominated. And then the consultant will have to make the case for eligibility under A and B and or C, whatever criteria they decide to nominate it under. They have to make that case, and so it could be completely different cases if they nominate it under criterion C or A. It just makes for a longer, more complex nomination to address two criteria or three.
Okay. And then would a contributing property have to meet all the criteria or one or the other? Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, Kurt, do you have any other questions? Because you seem to be the lone member left.
Other than why your house isn't eligible, but.
Maybe it's not.
No, I don't.
Well, Jason and Elizabeth, this has been extremely helpful for me. I appreciate your time. I don't mean to cut it off if other people have questions, but as the Frostwoods board member who's going to hopefully we're going to lead some very engaged conversations and get this going. I appreciate your insight.
And if we can come to any future meetings and clarify things further for more people, we'll be happy to do that.
Well, we've got March 22nd on the books for a second meeting, hopefully in person, and hopefully some new faces there.
That would be good.
Tell your neighbors, Kurt.
Will do. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, it's nice to meet y'all.
Yep.
Good night.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.